Hello and welcome to English 2. I'm your online teacher, Miss Abear. We started a new unit last time that we met on Julia Alvarez's A Genetics of Justice. And we are continuing in the same module from Engage New York about how do authors present details to develop and refine their claims. This particular unit is called No Flies Fly into a Closed Mouth. Today's lesson, we are diving into who is Trujillo. And so let's look at our end of the unit task before we move into our lesson agenda. You are going to rely on your reading and analysis of A Genetics of Justice to write a well-developed response to the prompt. How does the sentence, "No flies fly into a closed mouth," develop and refine one of Alvarez's ideas in A Genetics of Justice? And so let's look at our lesson agenda so that we can be prepared for what we will be doing today. We are going to do some homework accountability. We are going to read and discuss Remembering to Never Forget. We will do a masterful reading of A Genetics of Justice, and then we will do another reading and discussion of Genetics of Justice. Then we'll do a quick write, and then we'll close it out with a little homework. So today we are working within two texts. Both of them are informational texts. They both have to do with the same idea of Trujillo and his regime in the Dominican Republic. So let's dig right in and be accountable for our homework. So I want you to turn and talk and discuss the vocabulary words along with your definitions. And also I want you to discuss the questions and research that you came up with about Rafael Trujillo. Great job. So I'm going to kind of put on the board some of the things that I heard as I was walking around, some of the questions and answers that you guys came up with. And so you may have the same ones, you may have some different ones, but I think that the ones that I put on the board are the ones that I think are important for you to understand for this particular unit. So when was Rafael Trujillo born? He was born in 1891. You did not read that wrong. Not 1981, but 1891. It's a long time ago. How many people did he kill when he was in power? That's a pretty important question. He killed an estimated 50,000 people. And then how long was he in power? So you see it's 31 years, from 1930 to 1961. And then how was he killed? He was ambushed and killed in his car just outside of the Dominican capital in 1961. So you see there that he ruled or dictated all the way until his death in 1961. And so you kind of see how that will play into the Genetics of Justice text, as well as the other text that you read for homework last night. And so you should be able to see kind of some parallels because you've seen both of these texts in their entirety now. So now let's look at your text that you read last night. That was, I got to remember the name of that text, Remembering to Never Forget by Mark Mimot. So I want you to get that out, and I want you to work in a small group or with a partner, and I want you to answer the questions that are on your screen. Great job. Now I would like to ask a volunteer, and actually I'm going to need two volunteers because I have two different screens, to answer or to lead the discussion of these questions. I need the first two questions and then the last three questions. So I need two volunteers to come up and discuss those. Great job. Now let's go to the next set of questions and our next volunteer to lead that discussion. All right, now I want to, before we move into our next masterful reading, I want to remind you that the answers that are on the board are not necessarily the right answers, but they are the model answers. And so if you've got the same information, fantastic. But if you don't have the same information, you may want to consider revising your responses as you guys have these discussions. And just because I have what's on the board doesn't mean that's all the information that you need. read. So if someone in your class has something that's very profound that they have shared, you should probably revise your response to include that information as well. So it's very important that you kind of keep a running list or a running revision when you are doing these reading and discussions, because it's important for you to have the most information that you can, so that when you get ready to write these essays, when you get ready to write these quick writes, you've got as much information as possible to gather and put together for these essays. So now let's move into a masterful reading of paragraphs 5 through 8 of A Genetics of Justice by Julia Alvarez. Great job. Okay, now I want you to get into small groups again. This can be the same groups or it can be new groups. Again, this is at the discretion of the teacher that's in your classroom. And I want you to answer the questions that are on your board with your group. Fantastic job. Okay, again, I'm going to need 2 volunteers because I have 2 sets of questions that I want you guys to discuss within your classroom. So the first set of questions, we're going to pause and let you guys discuss these in your classroom. Great job. Now let's look at the next set of questions and the next volunteer to lead this discussion. Great job. Now, here we go. You remember in the last unit I told you that sometimes our state test or our end of the course test is going to ask us to consider 2 texts and how they intertwine and how they work together, especially when they're on the same topic or maybe they have the same theme. There's always something that will connect the 2 texts. And so now I'm going to ask you to consider combining those 2 texts and discussing, actually just reading and discussing with either a partner or small group, the 2 texts combined. Great job. I want to remind you, if you are not keeping up with the Central Ideas Tracking Tool or the Rhetorical Impact Tracking Tool, that you consider keeping all of this information in those tools at your disposal. Now I need somebody to come up, or 2 people, to come up and discuss the answers to these questions. Fantastic job. Okay, now it is time to close out the lesson and to look at your homework for the evening. But before we do, we have a quick write. So get out a piece of notebook paper and a pencil and let's write. Describe the details about Trujillo that are emphasized in Mark Mamet's article and in paragraphs 7 and 8 of A Genetics of Justice. What details does each writer emphasize, and what impact does that emphasis have on their portrayals of Trujillo? Good job. I know some of you were having a hard time. With our last unit, when we did our quick write, or one of our quick writes, you guys struggled some, or some of your classmates may have struggled. So it may be when you get to the end of your quick write, if the teacher in your classroom has noticed that other students have struggled, maybe you can lead a small discussion, or maybe some of you who just seem to just be able to get all of this information out can share your quick write so that those who are struggling can get just a little bit more information, so they at least know where to start and how to start. And it may be that they need to finish it for homework this evening. And if that's the case, then great, because guess what? There's no homework tonight. However, I want you to look on your screen, because I would love for you to consider finding a good book, curling up, and doing some reading on your own. This can be a book that you got from the library. Maybe the teacher in the classroom has a classroom library and they will allow you to check out a book. But I would love for you to find a book that you just can't get enough of, that you just kind of curl up with, and it's just a big comfort for you. So I would love for you to find a book that you can read independently. And until the next time that we meet, happy learning.